topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good evening, listeners, and exciting time of the week. Monday evening, I get to be with you. And folks, for those who have got the copies of our books, Expert to Influencer, and you will be seeing the link to it right at the bottom of the screen. So if you have not got your copy, do get your copy of Expert to Influencer, because now is the time to find your voice, your authentic voice, and share it with others to impact. So thank you to those who have got it. We really appreciate your generosity because it helps us help entrepreneurs impacted by COVID-19. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our guest for today, Dr. Anna Marie Temple.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So folks, Dr. Anna Marie is a best-selling author, mother of three, an award-winning speaker at Harvard Club of Boston. She has had over 100 news on TV and podcast appearances in her 22 years career. She has treated over 36,000 patients in person and hundreds via online courses. Her passion is to inspire, educate, and empower mamas to revamp their family's health and prevent children from developing chronic disease. So, Anna Marie, I have a question. I want to take you back to your childhood. Do you recall being interested, or where you were just having that pretend stethoscope and treating people?
Yeah, actually, my passions for treating children is what started when I was 5 years old. My sister, my family is from Romania, and we lived under the communist regime. And in 1975, when my sister was born, things were rough. And as my sister grew, she developed these horrible stomach pains, and my mom was holding her in her arms and crying at night. And we went to so many specialists trying to help her be better. And my mom, they told her she had celiac disease, and then she had to be gluten-free. And let me tell you something, in communist Romania, we could barely get food on the table, much less gluten-free options. So my mom had to struggle with a black market and medications and so many different interventions for my sister. And it was probably around that time when my passion for being a kid's doctor started. And I never really thought about it until recently. My husband was like, no, but really, why were you since you were 5? I've always said since I was 5 years old, I was going to be a pediatrician, not just a doctor. And I was like, well, it's probably because I wanted to prevent. And my passion is prevention. I do treat chronic disease, but my passion is prevention. Because what if we had a world where children didn't suffer? What if we had a place where mamas didn't have to Google endlessly? What if we have a place where parents didn't have to go to 1,000 specialists and stay up all night long with their children suffering? What if we lived in a world with healthy, thriving children?
Oh, that would be fantastic. And of course, we'll be talking about that as we move along in the show. So you mentioned that it was rough and that's one of the things, folks, I got to share, that I'm so grateful to have been born in a free country and living in a free country, that having a free country to call your home is a blessing. And so tell us, as you grew up, were you in Romania all the time, or when did you move to US?
I grew up in Romania until I was 11 years old. When I was 8.5, 9, my father left Romania to come to the US to see if this was a place where we could live a better life, because my parents were done with communism and they wanted something different for their family. And in 1981, my dad came to the US, and he was an electrical engineer. Came to the US, he didn't speak any English, decided he was going to stay. He defected. He took a job at Bloomingdale's scrubbing toilets, because he had to work in the day and night school for learning English. And about a year and a half, 2 years later, he knew enough English to get an engineering job. And our life in Romania was very difficult, because under communism, once my mom went to the embassy, not embassy, but the powers that be, and requested a visa to leave the country, she immediately got fired from her job. So there was no more income coming into our family. And so she had to figure out how we're going to live until we were going to be allowed to come to the US, because we got a visa to leave Romania right away, but we couldn't get into the US. And my dad, having defected, he wasn't a citizen. So that was a problem. And they told us it's probably going to be 7 years before we can come to the US. So my mom had to figure out how we're going to live on no income, because once communist regime knew that you were trying to leave the country, you couldn't get hired anywhere, not so much as a grocery store, clean, nothing. So my mom sold the car, and then we would, and there's no banks at that time in Romania because they just stole your money. So, and I remember when I would open the armoire where she would keep her underwear stacked, there were piles of cash, just stacks of cash. And then that would dwindle, and then she would sell the dining room furniture, and then more piles of cash. And then that would dwindle, and then it would be, other furniture and stuff. And it got to the point before we left for Romania, the house was literally empty. We would just play on hardwood floors with, dirt, because everything was sold. And we had beds, obviously, and we had our kitchen stuff, but everything else was gone in order to make it. And then when I went to summer camp that year, and I came off the bus. It was July. And as I got off the bus, my mom's like, "We're going to America." And I'm like, I can cry right now. And it was, I had no idea before I went to camp that this was going to happen. And I was like, "When are we going?" And she's like, "Next week." So we came August 4th, 1984, is we packed whatever bags we had left and off to America. We went, and we arrived here in New York City in 1984.
Oh, wow. That gives me the chills. And I'm sure that even though it left its mark on you, it helped you develop qualities that have lasted with you for a whole of your lifetime.
Yeah, you have to develop resilience. I mean, talk about, I didn't know any English, and I was in 6th grade. And so when we came August, right? So I had 2 weeks to learn English. And so we had this English tutor, and I'm trying to learn English. And I went to middle school, all new ball game, right? Don't even know any English, don't have any friends, didn't really have any clothes, because we just had 2 pairs of clothes. In Romania, it was all uniforms. So my parents were like, "Well, you just wear the same clothes over and over again, because it's kind of like a uniform." And so that's how I started 6th grade. So when my children were complaining about starting school, I'm like, "Well, just imagine this in French." So you have to become resourceful. I mean, it was hard. I mean, I got bullied. I got made fun of. I couldn't speak English. I had same clothes. I looked weird. I had this unibrow, one brow, whole brow against my face. My teeth were, the best part out of all of that, I had missing teeth. So I have congenital missing lateral teeth, which is actually now a more not popular, but more common thing. Well, then it wasn't that common. Anyway, so I had missing teeth, not the front 2 teeth, but the ones next to them are the laterals. And the way they were going to fix that problem, they put braces to make spaces for those teeth to come in, but they didn't put temporary teeth. They just left holes in my face. So now I have no clothes. I'm weird looking. I have a unibrow. I can't speak English, and I have holes in my face. So we'll just say it was slightly challenging growing up
Well,
in
to
the
say the
US.
least, sounds like a battle to me. Wow. And that was during your teen years, and those are some of the roughest years in a girl's lifetime.
It was during the formative years, which may have caused some slight anxiety and some rebellion, shall we say, and some difficult times. Yes, it was challenging.
Right. And so many times what happens is that people cannot get past those shortcomings, in the sense that, oh, I had this, and they are so caught up in the past that they don't live in the present and then don't move on. So how are you able to move past all the things that you went through?
Gosh, my parents pretty much had this example of you can't undo the past, and life's hard, right? So they came from Romania. I mean, the stories that they tell from how they grew up and stuff, but life is hard. And my parents were like, stop your whining, do what you're supposed to be doing, and just move forward. And they're like, in my house, there was no option to go backwards. There was no option to whine and complain. I'm not saying people that have anxiety whine and complain. I'm just saying that there was no room for that. It was like, I went to counseling, and my mom's like, when are we going to be done with that? I mean, how long are we going to be doing this? Like, well, I'm kind of have some issues that kind of need to like dig through and heal. But that was like my family's mentality. They're like, we go through hard stuff. Life is hard, and you just do what you're supposed to be doing. School was number one. Sports, they never attended one or two things they attended, but that was not important. They're like, you just study and you will make something of yourself, and it will all work out. But no, none of this like, oh, I feel sorry for myself. There was no room for that. It was tough.
Well, I'd like to acknowledge you for what you've achieved. So as you move through your high school years, were there any better? And tell us your story through college and getting into medical school.
Got it. Yeah. So one of the things that happened in high school is that I went to a doctor who told me that I had high cholesterol issues, and he was like, well, you need to eat this diet, and you can never have things on the red side. You should just only have things on the green side, and sometimes yellow, but green. And what I did, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm an overachiever and I'm, a perfectionist. So I was like, oh, stick with the green side. And what happened is I started losing weight. And as I started losing weight, I got all this other attention that I didn't have before, right? Because I was a weird looking one, goofy, no teeth, no one cared. All of a sudden, they're like, oh, you're so thin. I can't believe how thin you are. So then I developed an eating disorder. I'm not blaming anyone else. I'm just saying I started restricting food for a specific thing. I was getting feedback for a specific reason. And all of a sudden in my head, I was like, I am awesome. Let's keep this going. And the more food I restricted, the more sick my brain got. And then it was a whole bunch of mess. So that took several years to get better while in high school, which is something that a lot of women deal with during high school and college years. And I don't think a lot of women talk about it. Anyway, it was part of the whole anxiety, trying to feel like I belong, trying to make friends, trying to feel like I was someone special. And I took hold of food, and I try to control that because I couldn't control other things in my social life for various reasons, lack of confidence, etc. But underneath all of that, I always studied. I was always, always diligent. Didn't matter how late it was. I never skipped out on studying. I always took my test, always showed up for class, always. And then I was able to make really good grades, and my focus was to get into med school. So that my plan to become a pediatrician never changed. And all of a sudden, I was like, University of Chapel Hill, because someone talked about it. I was like, oh, that's amazing. It's a great price for out of state. It looks like they have an amazing medical school. That's where I'm going to go. So I got into Chapel Hill. And that's where I went for 4 years, and I excelled in my studies. I paid so much attention. Life completely changed when I went to college, and it was really related to confidence. It was not related to people in high school. I had a confidence problem, and therefore I put a negative energy out. And once I went to college, I put out a different kind of energy. And lo and behold, by then I also had teeth. So that was really important. Having teeth makes a big difference. So had all my teeth, and so went to college, new place. I was 8 hours away from Jersey, and was able to make new friends, create a new identity, and I blossomed and I thrived, and I did everything that I needed to do in order to get in med school. And at the end of 4 years, I got into Carolina Med School, and it was a dream come true. And I'll tell you, there's a test you take before medical school. It's called the MCATs, and it's a medical admission test. And I've taken SATs. I've taken I don't like the standardized tests, but I did okay. The MCATs, I was so petrified and paranoid, because I was like, if I could just get through this test, the rest is golden. I just got to get through this test, get into med school, and the rest is going to be not a breeze. But I was like, I got this. So I was terrified, petrified. And then I did that test. I did, good enough to get into med school. And after that, any other tests that came, like my medical boards, I don't sweat my medical board, not because I'm a genius, but my corner, my turning point test was the MCATs. Anyway, and that was my thing. And then once I went into med school, I did all that I needed to do, and still all the way through, pediatrics was the key thing.
Absolutely. So you've had a tough life, and one of the things I always share with people, so many times women, and most of the women, including myself, we do get stuck in appearance. And what happens is that we forget that no matter how we are looking outside, there is that beauty within you that nobody can take away. And when we get introduced to our potential within, when you get introduced to who you are for real, that's when it's almost like that cloak falls off. We tend to wear that cloak. Okay, I gotta have this because this is my perception. If I don't do this X, Y, and Z, I'm not going to be perceived well. I'm not going to be the best out there in the world. So that's one thing from your journey. What would you tell women? How to find that inner person? And folks, of course, we have talked about this before. We want to see and hear perspective of Anna Marie. So Anna Marie, share with us, how did you connect with that inner person? You said that taking MCAT was your turning point.
Yeah. And I wish, so my 48-year-old self would like to tell my 20-year-old self to just get over herself a little bit, because she was really stressing over different things. And, the thing that was now in, almost as I'm almost 50, I have this inner confidence that I'm like, I don't really care what anyone thinks. That, if I'm wearing a green shirt and they don't like it, I'm like, I don't really care. And if you don't like my hair, I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to find the people that like my, whatever. It doesn't really, it's no longer, it doesn't define me. Yes, it's nice, I like this, but it doesn't define me. When I was 16, my appearance defined me. And it's really hard when you have missing teeth to say that it doesn't matter, because it does, when people are just making fun of you, right? It does.
Absolutely.
But if I was more open as a young person, if I was more open to the world, I was very closed. I was waiting for people to be my friend, to come and make friends with me. I was waiting for people to see me. I was waiting for people to come and be like, oh, come here, oh, you poor little foreign girl. Nobody has time for that. No one's going to do that. If I was like, hey, I'm here, I want to be friends. Let me be a good friend to you. And then you might be a good friend to me, but it doesn't matter. My whole purpose is I'm a good person and I want to be a good friend to everybody. The thing that I struggled and probably almost suffocated me in my high school years was waiting for other people to make the first move, seeing my self-worth in their eyes. when I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't advancing myself except in my education. Socially, I wasn't doing anything, if I look back to it, to put out a positive energy and a positive vibe for people to be more welcoming. And as I did that MCAT and I went into med school, my confidence was like, I got this. I walked into that med school class on the first day and I was like, I got this, boys and girls. What's coming at me? And I made friends and it was no problem. But it was my confidence. I looked the same in med school as I looked in high school. It wasn't a big difference.
Yeah, and that's it. It's about showing up, because always know that no matter what, folks, in our eyes, we're never going to be perfect. And there's nothing like perfection. Because think about it, if there was something like perfection, then it would be out there. So it's okay to be perfectly imperfect, and knowing that and loving yourself as you are. Because when you find your authentic voice and step out, when you show up, then you own the stage. And rather than standing on the sidelines, you can get on the stage, yes, and claim your stage. So talking about claiming, we've talked about a bit over here on the mindset aspect. And now let's talk about, how did you get into the integrative side of medicine? Because you have talked about you wanted to be a pediatrician, you went into that, and usually what happens is allopathy overall looks at symptoms. And what you're talking about, the questions that you asked at the beginning of the show, was several different questions that begs us to ponder over, what if we could eradicate? What if we could take a look at things before it even happens? And now that means we are going to the root cause. So what brought you to that perspective?
Well, it was 2007. And at that time, I was in practice 5 years and I had 3 children. They were 2, 4, and 6. And all 3 of my children had chronic disease. They had asthma, eczema, allergies, recurrent ear infection, recurrent croup, constipation, seasonal allergies that were so bad in my 2-year-old that on Easter, he couldn't go out for an Easter egg hunt because his eyes would swell shut, his tears would stream down his face, and his body would be covered in hives. And we'd have to bring him inside because he was just scratching and writhing on the ground. My 4-year-old had snot, like the kind of boogers that in this day and age, you would never be allowed on a plane, in a school, outside of your home. He was so disgusting. And he also was plagued with ADHD. And so as my children were on their like 3rd round of antibiotics, I took the 3-ring circus to the doctor and I said, what is the cause of my children being on antibiotics again? And why do I have so many meds? When I would go on vacation, I would have like a little tiny suitcase full of medication, inhalers, creams, over-the-counter medications, you name it. It was intense. And I didn't think that was okay. Anyway, the answer that I got was like, well, for the little one, we've run out of meds. He was already on 5 medications. They're like, the only next step is to do allergy shots. He was 2 years old. My daughter, they're like, well, chronic inhaled steroids will keep asthma under control. Chronic eczema steroid creams will keep eczema under control. She'll take Zyrtec daily, which keep her allergies under control, which will control the asthma and the eczema. And she'll outgrow her ear infections and her recurrent croup. And as for the snotty one, and honestly, at that point, I really kind of stopped paying attention. I was like, all right, we're not getting anywhere. And I walked out of that office, and I'll tell you, my doctor self had no idea what to do. I was like, I got nothing. But then my mama self, because when the mama warrior kicks in and she's like, what? My babies are supposed to be on chronic meds for the rest of their lives? This is their story? Under no circumstances is this my children's story. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to find a way and I'm going to find a path. And as my parents taught me, we're not looking back, we're looking forward, and there's no excuses, and we're going to figure this out. And it was a week later that I went to my children's school, And it was a nutritionist that was giving a talk. And, whenever somebody does it, I'm always walking, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what they're going to be saying, but I'm here anyway to support the school because I'm so amazing. And I walked in, and it was on that day, 7:30 in the morning, sitting in that classroom, that the fog lifted, and I realized the root cause of my children's disease. All the nutritionist talked about was sugar. And I went home on that Tuesday night after work, and to the horror of my children and my husband, I went into that pantry and I got rid of the Lucky Charms and the Pop-Tarts and the Cinnamon Toast Crunch, delicious, and the juice boxes and the chocolate milks. You name a garbage food, we had it, because I felt I was feeding my kids fine because they had a fruit at lunch and a vegetable at dinner. They were balanced. And this is what I did for a living. I was a pediatrician practicing preventive medicine, but I didn't learn this in med school. So my mama still had to take over, and she was like, here's the thing. I don't know what the medical research is on this, but it cannot be wrong to put more fruits and vegetables in these people's mouths and to get rid of the garbage. And it was at that time that I became an outcast in my family. My husband, who's an orthopedic surgeon, and I fought about food for the next 5 years. My friends were like, you have lost your mind. My family wrote me out of the will. They're like, she's gone. And my medical partners were like, we don't even know what to do with this. And it was over the next 5 years and it was one day at a time, one step at a time. There was nothing massive going on, but my children stopped needing antibiotics. They stopped needing steroids. They stopped needing topical steroid creams. Their asthma was gone. And then in the 11 years later, we moved to New Zealand, so my husband and I quit our jobs and we moved to New Zealand, no health insurance, no doctors, no medications. And my children thrived, and they climbed the highest mountains, and they bungee jumped off the tallest bridges. And I realized that we can turn around from chronic disease and have children thrive. And when I came back to the US in 2018, I was like, well, I'm not going to do that again, because I was in a standard medical practice before, and I kept fighting continuously against the traditional model. I was like, they're not listening to me. And then when I came in 2018, I started my own practice, and here we are 3 years later.
Interesting.
Still thriving.
Very interesting. And it's hard, especially with sugar, because if you kind of think about it, anytime you're celebrating, from birthdays to holidays, it's all about sugar. And of course, who would deny that those chocolate chip cookies or any of that tastes so darn good? That's amazing that you're able to absorb sugar from your diet and turn around your kids' lives. So what made y'all go to New Zealand?
My husband, being an orthopedic surgeon, at that time he became burned out, which burnout is an epidemic in the medical profession. And he was like, I cannot do orthopedics anymore. But before I quit, we were actually in Australia. I had talked him into going to Australia for 4 weeks, which is unheard of in the US. And I was like, we're going to Australia. We're going to do the trip of a lifetime, and with the whole family. And we're in Australia, in the middle of Uluru, which is like middle of nowhere, Australia. And he was like, I know what I'm going to do. When we get back to the States, I'm going to quit my job, and then we're going to move to New Zealand. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? So we came home, and he quit his job. He had 3 interviews 48 hours later in New Zealand. He had a contract signed within a week, and within 3 months, we had moved to New Zealand.
So I love the Maori traditions in New Zealand. Did you have a chance to come across those or meet them in person?
Oh, yeah. So my children were in school, immersed with everybody. So they were part of all the traditions, and my children could do the haka and use the poi and do all the different stuff. And so because in their schools, they actually learned all the different dances and songs and traditions. And because it was fully just everyone is together anyway. So it was a beautiful experience and it opened our eyes to so much more than if we just stayed here, that extra year and a half.
Absolutely. What a journey. And how are your kids doing now?
They're great. They didn't want to come back. And, and I'll tell you the reason they didn't want to come back, so New Zealanders, when I was discussing, I was like, oh my gosh, my kids, they just can't come back to the States. And they're like, is it because of the guns?
Oh.
I'm like, what? So apparently in New Zealand and a lot of part of the world, they literally think that we all walk around with guns in our holsters down the street. And I was like, no, that's actually not okay. I see what you're saying, because based on what you see on TV, I see how you get that impression, but that's not actually what happens. My children did not want to come back because for the first time in their young lives, their parents were no longer stressed out of their minds. With careers, my husband was a successful orthopedic surgeon, top of his game, was a team doctor for every team around us. I was a high producer in my pediatric clinic, always the top of the satisfaction scores, la, la, la. And then on top of that, in my spare time, I would go and educate in elementary schools about food, about nutrition. So we're always going, our stress level was intense. And even as we were trying to reduce our stress levels and we thought we were doing good, when we moved to New Zealand, within 6 weeks, the children individually came up to us and they're like, you know what? We love it here. This is so nice. We love coming home. There's no stress. John and I looked at each other like, what have we been doing? So we stressed out our children to no end. And in New Zealand, we found peace. And, because I had to let go of my friends, I had to let go of my social life, I had to let go of my job, and I had to wait for my visa to come in. And all of a sudden, it was just the 5 of us with 5 forks, 5 knives, 5 cups, and we had to bind together and figure it out, each day as it came. We didn't know how to open a bank account. We had to buy cars. We had nothing. So we had our clothes on our back. What I'm saying is, like, we didn't have a place to stay. We didn't have family. So it was the first time probably since I moved to the United States in 1984 where I felt like I truly had nothing. We went and had to buy sheets, and we had to go buy beds from eBay, and we had to go buy tables from eBay. On the first day, the kids were going to school. They're like, what are we going to use to put the peanut butter on our sandwich? And I was like, oh, well, I guess we'll get a pen. We didn't have any utensils, because I'm like, oh my God. So it's, anyway, so we had to learn to work from scratch. And then we learned that we can get along with so much less. And when we left New Zealand, we asked the kids, like, what'd you guys learn? What was your favorite thing? Every one of them was like, we realized we have way too much stuff. We don't need all the stuff that we have at home in the US. We're fine without it, because we've lived 1.5 years without it. And apparently we're as happier than we were when we had all the stuff. So the kids came with a new appreciation for stuff. So with less stuff, there's been less complaining, less I want this, less I need that. Before we left, there was a lot of comparison. So-and-so has this and so-and-so has that. Since we've come back, nada. Everyone is just, whatever we get is amazing. An appreciation for what they have. They're kids, so they're not perfect. And, but I'm just saying as a general thing, which was, oh my gosh, like, just made my heart so happy.
Absolutely. So you have talked about the absence of sugar from your kids' diet. And now as you're practicing, share a few tips and living lifestyle that can allow parents to have their kids free of chronic diseases and preventing anything else that was prevalent in your kids.
Yeah. So one of the things is kind of back to saying that, we have so much, right? So all the kids are like, oh, everyone has Doritos and everyone gets, candy at school. I mean, I can't even get over like that. Teachers just give out candy. Like, it's not a problem for every answer that you have at school, but that's not what we're going to go here. The thing for us, if we start to understand how inflammatory sugar is, and if there's one thing that the pandemic has taught us, the pandemic is not that the virus is extra special, is that the world is extra sick. And if we could focus a little more on our own health, on our own insides, we can focus a little less on medications and other interventions from the outside. But it's so easy to just take a pill. It's so easy to just have somebody tell you, and we blame stuff. Cutting down on sugar is hard because sugar addiction in children begins when they're in the womb. They're in mama's belly. When I was pregnant, it was like, and then I'll eat this because I'm eating for two, and I can have as many donuts, and I'll have ice cream because I have cravings, and I'm so cute pregnant. And, and I was just, and
Oh my
never in
goodness.
my
You said
mind,
it,
right?
because I remember going for ice cream. Oh yeah, you gotta put on. I had lost weight in my first trimester, so go for it. I was having milkshakes, and as you said, babies are in the womb and get addicted. Yeah.
Right. So we're creating their taste
Mhm.
buds in the womb. And evolutionary wise, taste buds are supposed to protect us. So sweet taste buds, when you go into the forest for hunting and gathering, use the sweet berries and the sweet fruits, yummy, they're safe. When they're bitter and disgusting, you spit them out because they're poisonous. Same thing, when something is more earthy color, safe. When it's bright colors, like in mushrooms, right, you spit it out because it's dangerous. But so the babies are born with a bit of a sweet tooth for mama's breast milk and formula if we need to, because sometimes nursing doesn't work. But for breast milk, so then the sweet taste buds for breast milk, great. But now the mama continues eating during breastfeeding because you're starving. Remember when you're breastfeeding, you're just like, so hungry, and you eat whatever you can. Now you're sleep deprived and you're tired and exhausted and stressed from having a human depending on you. So you crave, what is that? Oh, right, starches and sugar, because that's what makes us feel, that's what feeds anxiety, that's what feeds exhaustion, that's what feeds depression. So we eat it, boom, now the breast milk is just a little sweeter. And now the children have more affliction for sweet taste buds. And then they go to school, they go to birthday parties, and sometimes there are 1,000 birthday parties in a month. So they have cupcakes all the time. And everybody's like, oh my God, they're so cute. The way we're going to reward them is with sugar. And the grandparents, all they know is let's reward them with sugar. And I'm like, hey guys, you know what? There's like activities we can do. There's like games, like other things that we can do. But anyway, so just realizing that sugar is much more prevalent than you think it is. Most people walk around going like, oh, I don't eat a lot of sugar. Really? How about you count and see, can you keep your added sugar intake to less than 24 grams a day? And that's being generous. Added sugar is not fruits or vegetables. Added sugar is your packaged foods. And now the FDA has a label, a specific place where it says added sugar. Keep that to less than 24 grams of sugar a day. Start there. For children, we don't deprive them of food, but just remember that food in a package, I'm sorry, generally is garbage. There's no such thing as junk food. There's junk and then there's food. I know, I didn't do it. I'm not the food industry. I'm just a messenger and it's horrible. But if we feed our children plants, fruits and vegetables, fruits are sweet. So here's a simple tip. When your child asks for a snack, and if they're my children, it's like this: snack, 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 snack. You're like, literally, we just ate, like snack, snack. If they're snack sharks, what we're going to do is before you offer them a packaged food, you're going to offer them a fruit or a vegetable. And if they don't want a fruit or a vegetable, they're not hungry. And they're going to go, but I am. And you have to be consistent. You never give in and you stick to it, and you'll be amazed at the transformation, because now suddenly they're like, oh, I'll eat an apple. It's going to be, there's going to be whining, crying, fighting. Again, this mama don't care. Like, you're not going to starve to death. I offered you food. If you said no, you're fine. But you stick with that. That's a simple rule. So you turn from being a no parent. No, you can't have chips. No, you can't. You turn to a yes parent. Of course you can have these chips as soon as you eat this apple. Of course you can have whatever granola bar as soon as you have some carrots and hummus. And then they're like, I'm here to tell you, after 12 years, my children still reach for a fruit generally rather than a vegetable before they get a snack. My daughter is like amazing with her vegetables. But anyway, so that's one. Another one is, how about we stop with the old dessert, which is my favorite. So like in lunch, they're like, oh my God, the kids need something sweet in their lunch. No, they don't. They don't need a reward. They don't. And they're like, oh, well, it's a treat. If you have a treat every single day, that is your diet. That is not a treat. A treat is, I have a cupcake for my birthday. I have cookies for Christmas. I have candies at Easter. When you have a cookie every day, that is your diet. You eat cookies as your diet. So instead of that, we're going to give them some sweet things that are going to be just in the fruit category. You don't have to be, remember, in season is going to be the best. Right now we have summer. Oh my gosh. We should be eating melons like it's going out of style. And you should, in your pool bag, there should be no cookies, No desserts. What's with the desserts? Desserts are when you go out or you celebrate something. It should not be your every time night at dinner time. Fruits and vegetables are a perfect ending to a fabulous meal. So the things we're going to do is we're going to just decrease how many times we put treats as sugary things in our children's lunches.
Some great tips. I like how you said about going from a no mama to yes mama.
Because, a lot of times we think that we're
Right.
going to deprive the children. I was like, well, what are we depriving them of? Depriving them of a poor, of a good, if you give them a lot of sugar, you deprive them of an awesome immune system. So now they have to have snot, congestion, and cough and be continuously sick and be on medications because we don't want to say no to sugar. And sugar is just one of the most inflammatory things. And unfortunately, the messages have been so mixed because now we're talking about, oh, I don't give them sugar, I give them stevia. Same problem. You're just calling it a different name.
Yeah, it's a tough battle to fight because if you kind of look at just the world statistics, diabetes type 2 diabetes is on the rise. And inflammatory diseases are on the rise. And if you kind of think about it, having sugars, I come from a biochemistry background, it does propagate inflammation. And that propagates so many other diseases in addition. So, Anna Maria, you have given us such wonderful tips. If somebody were to reach out to you, how could they connect with you? Or if you have a gift with you, any links that you may have and would love to share with our audience?
Yeah, so the link that I'm going to share with you guys, actually, because right now children are very sick because they're getting all these illnesses. We're coming out of quarantine and viral illnesses are everywhere. So a lot of parents are battling fever. So I'm going to give you a handout on how to holistically and naturally deal with your child's fever without having to rely on medications every time. Sometimes it's important, but we're going to do fever. People want to connect with me. My favorite platform is Instagram, and at Dr. Ana Maria Temple. I give tons of free education. I want to, as I said, one of my missions is to educate families and empower them to take care of the children, heal the children. I could only see so many people in clinic. Therefore, I've created a platform where I can reach, thousands of folks. And of course, if you need from Instagram, you can connect with me regarding our eczema courses, my baby course, of course, my book. I'm trying to put out as many opportunities for you all to be able to be your own best doctors and be able to heal your children more naturally.
Well, that's fantastic. So, what would be your one last tip for our listeners that they could walk away with and implement?
Got it. My favorite tip is when you look at the world of, if you want to change your lifestyle, you want to work out, you want to change sugar, whatever, start with one step. The number one reason why things fail is because we're try to do everything. So the example I gave, I walked to my pantry and I threw everything. Okay, it's a little exaggerated for the story part. I threw out a couple of things, but not everything. I started with one thing, and that's what I talk about in the book, in the introduction. I tell you every little step that I did. I mean, for one of my steps was buying a blender. So I bought the blender, looked at it for a while, and then learned how to make some smoothies that were literally ice cream. I'm not kidding. It was ice cream, strawberries, and milk, because I convinced my children that they can have a strawberry milkshake for breakfast to get rid of the Lucky Charms. And over time, I started moving out the ice cream, put yogurt and added honey, and removed the milk and did almond milk and added spinach. And my smoothie today, 12 years later, is nothing what it was like. But I started with one step. So whatever it is, wherever you are in your journey, just do one step. And your goal is to be better today than when you were yesterday. When I started my clinic, I did not know anything about my business. I could barely balance a checkbook. And by that, I mean I embezzle because I really like shoes. So I didn't even balance my checkbook. And then I started my practice. And I started my practice with having coffee with one person. And that person led me to the next person. And over the 2-month period, I got myself an entourage of people who can tell me how to build a business of which I knew nothing about. So if I could, trained doctor who no knowledge of business, no knowledge of marketing, can write a book, do courses, be on social media, be on TV. It can be done, but it didn't happen in one day. It was one step at a time, and it was being better today than I was yesterday.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. Without you, the show would not be what it is for. And thank you, Rebel, for making the show possible. And remember, as we have talked about, find that 1 hour of time every month. Give that time to your loved ones or someone, whether it's in the form of a smile or a compliment or doing something for someone. 1 hour a month, folks, so we can make a difference. And until next time, be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week, Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time.